Hi, my name is Ronald Potier, and I live in Hemingford, Quebec. And I'd like to take you into my new pottery studio and show you how to make a teapot. So this is a stoneware clay. And today, I'm going to show you how to make a teapot. Or two. So the first thing we do with the clay is we want to get that in the middle. And stoneware clay that I would use on the wheel like this is quite common for dinnerware. Plates, teapots, like I'm going to make today. There are other types of clay, but this is the one I like the best for functional work. It's strong. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a few lids. How this is a lid, right now you have to look at it and realize that it is upside down. This is the part that'll go into the teapot right here. So this clay is a clay prepared by a company in Ontario, and it would be a recipe of 9 or 10 or even more different mined clays from all over North America. For those of you who like chemistry, clay is made out of silica, which is SiO2, and alumina, which is mined from bauxite, which is the same place that they get aluminum, and water. It's really just 3 simple materials. And if you watch carefully, I run that needle right under it and pick it up with my fingers and a needle. So my clay is well prepared. It's said that clay molecules are oblong, and I try and tell this to my students. Of course, we can't see the molecules, but apparently they're oblong. Think of the shape of a piece of rice. You know why that's important is that while I'm preparing my clay, this is part of the mixing also, the centering, and the molecules are apparently lined up in a circle. I don't know if it's true, but it makes sense to me because I can feel when the clay is ready. And when the clay is ready, it's very easy to work with. In pottery, there's many, many stages, and no stage is more important than another. So this is going to be a spout on a teapot. I like my spouts quite thin. I like my spouts quite tall. You may not understand yet how this is going to be a spout, but you will. I am basically going to cut much of this later as I close it up smaller. It also forces the clay in an upward position. If you've ever done pottery, you'll know that teapot spouts are one of the more difficult small items because the teapot spout is so important. A good teapot has to pour well. If that spout flares at the tip, that'll spread your tea in different directions. If you've got a nice taper, the weight of the water, the tea behind it, will shoot the tea out in a nice stream. There we go. So we're going to cut that one off. And we'll prepare a pad of clay. When I'm making teapots or bean pots or vases, coffee mugs, that first little bit of clay was really just for my teapot body. And this is the clay I'm going to make the teapot with. Once it's centered, we can start the teapot. Push down in the middle, exactly in the middle, adjust my speed a little bit. When I was a kid and I started making pottery, I did have access very quickly to some electric wheels in my summer job. But when I learned at school, I learned on an old kick wheel. I turn the wheel with my feet, and I work with my hands, and it's kind of like a great big lazy Susan. So I've made a flat bottom here. The hole doesn't go all the way to the bottom of the bat. It stops short, so I've got about 3/8 of an inch of clay left on the bottom. And now I'll start making it taller. This is called pulling the clay up. So that's one pull. To make a thin piece, it's quite important to make it tall first. This is going to be a round-bellied teapot. So that's a third pull. And that's not going to get a lot taller, but I think I'm going to try one more time. Make that just a little bit thinner. A couple inches taller if I can. Now I've left a fair amount of clay at the top, and that's going to make my seat. Seat is the part that holds the lid. A little bit of water. Make that clay a little bit more slippery. And I'm going to start bulging the teapot outwards now. Once I start putting the belly in the teapot, it'll be too late to make the teapot any taller. In fact, if you watch carefully, as I put a belly in it, the teapot will get shorter. If you don't know what I mean by a belly, just watch. Now, of course, the lid is not going to be this big. I'm going to close that up in a bit. But first, I'm going to make that belly a little bigger. And a little bigger again. It's very important to not have any water pooling in the bottom of your teapot. That's another reason I don't use a lot of water when I'm throwing. Throwing is what potters call this. It means making pottery on a wheel. En français, c'est tournassage. I turn this in to make the seat a little bit harder to reach in. My hands are not small enough. You can see I have quite a strong bit of clay up here at the top. And that's the most important part for me about a teapot. It's got to be beautiful, but it's got to pour well. It's got to be easy to use. Got a wire under that. It's kind of like a guitar string. And it's cut for later, so that when I need to finish, I don't have to ruin the teapot with finger marks. And I do like teapots that are different. I find it very hard to make one style of teapot. This teapot is a little bit wider, it's going to be, with a wider bottom. And this is the kind of teapot that I like to have what I call an overhead handle on it. It's a teapot that is very easy to handle if you're not too strong, because there's lots of room for two hands. A lot of potters don't consider themselves artists. They call themselves craftsmen, craftspeople. I do consider myself an artist. I have the artist spirit. I like to work with a lot of different materials. I look for solutions where a lot of people would give up. Stubborn, I guess. My grandfather was an artist. I have numerous aunts that have made beautiful paintings. My grandfather loved to build things and he loved to paint. My grandfather was quite a talented man. He was a fisherman by trade, but when he needed something, he made it. My father is a pianist. Growing up, I always thought he was a great artist because he taught me how to draw horses and trees pretty good with a pencil. But his real talent lies in the performing arts. I think a lot of people today don't discover their inner artist as much as people have in the past. There was a time if you wanted something, you had to make it. Certainly a satisfaction from pouring a cup of tea from a teapot that you can say you made. We don't necessarily have to show that to people. I'm going to reach inside carefully, change the shape a wee bit. A lot of my students ask me, how do you make each of them so much the same? And if you watch carefully and look carefully, they are not. Each teapot has its own character. Okay, here we are, back the following day. My teapots are a lot harder. They're no longer soft. This clay is going to be used again for something else. It doesn't go to waste. And I'm going to remove some of this clay. I'm doing a couple of things. I'm making it a little lighter, improving the shape. And of course, this is an area we haven't worked on yet. This is underneath. And a teapot, a round-bodied teapot like this, with a smaller bottom, gives it an elegant look. And take some of the middle out there. And this part here that I'm not going to trim is what we call a foot. If you look under your dishes at home, you'll find that most of them are made this way too. See, there's a space here, and that is where I will sign my name and where the piece was made. There are collectors who will not buy your work if it's not properly signed. There we go. Looks a little messy right now, but when the pot dries completely, I'll brush away these crumbs and it will be very legible. I am just going to round the edges. Now I don't want that entire bottom to go into the kiln without any glaze. So what I like to do with this type of teapot is put a couple of, well, 4 actually, to be more specific, 4 feet. Now these feet will not stick if they are not attached well. And I'm leaving it a little bit wet with slippery clay. And you'd think slippery would be bad, but the scratches will hold the pieces of clay that I add to this. I will shape these, I call them feet, and try and blend them in, make them look like they come right out of the teapot naturally. I wish I had dated all my pieces along the way. I started making pottery in 1973, and I don't believe I have a single piece with 1973 marked on it. I want this teapot to sit flat. I don't want it to rock. And when you have 3 legs, a piece doesn't rock, but it's not as stable. When you have 4 legs, you have to make sure they're just right. So I'm going to put it on this bat and I'm going to leave it there to stiffen up a little bit. So now that we have a trimmed teapot with a foot and a name, it's time to add a spout. And the first thing we do with the spout is we're going to cut it so that it fits on the teapot. Done quite a few of these over the years. You can see how thin the spout is. It's not terribly thick. We don't want it too thick. It only adds weight. It doesn't really add a lot of strength. The strength is in the construction. And the shape. Round shapes are very strong. Speaking of shape, I'm just going to shape this one a little bit more. When I fill my teapot, I don't want the water being able to spill out just sitting on the counter. So this spout has to be as high as, well, even if I overfilled it. Now you would think we just put a big hole, but actually that leaves a teapot weaker. And in case people want to use loose tea, I like to make numerous small holes. It's important for that first hole to be at the bottom so that it doesn't leave half a spout full of tea. Little thing that every potter should know. I don't know how important it is to have the holes in a pattern, but I kind of like a pattern of some sort. Now the teapot, like we said before, was made yesterday. By putting it under plastic, I kept the spout a little softer. And that way, I can reach in without denting it. Just a little bit of water or a little bit of slip. I'm gonna blend that teapot spout in. Now when that stiffens just a little bit more, I'll be able to come back and with a wet finger make it even a little bit more perfect. Now, there's a real fine line here between having this too sharp and too fragile and not having it sharp enough so that it won't catch that last drip. There are many methods of making handles. I've tried most of them as far as I know. And this is an old, I think this came from the Brits, although they probably got it from the Chinese or the Japanese. So that's where the top of the handle will go. And this is where the handle will attach at the bottom. And attach it. Finish attaching it. Now I can clean it up a little better later, but right now I just want to make sure it's going to hold. Now I can see my spout and handle in line. I can see that they're directly across from each other. And choose an amount of handle that I want. And if I were to put down the teapot right side up, it's going to sag a little. So we're going to put this aside to set up a little bit, and then we'll clean that teapot up, that teapot handle, and make it a little neater after. Spout's going to go right there. Somewhere in the studio I have a tool that is made exactly for this, but in a pinch, a drill bit will work very well. Now this is a different style of handle. A handle that is a little bit higher. Cut a little bit off there. And I want a nice big handle out of this one. Now these I don't blend in. My handles, I allow them to look like additions. I like to balance the look with an appendage on the opposite side of the teapot spout. We can take advantage of the fact that this clay is still fairly soft. Now with a little bit of moisture, I'm going to give this a little bit of a squeeze. And we know this is firmly attached because it was made yesterday. It's not an attachment, actually. It's part of the piece that I threw on the wheel. Like I said, I don't want it too dainty. And I'm going to put it inside the frame of my overhead handle. And I like to give it a somewhat organic shape. And I like this relationship between the three pieces. We have three small appendages that line up together. And I think that teapot's good for now. I hope this teapot is going to serve somebody for many years. Okay, great. This is the teapot you saw me make a couple of weeks ago. Maybe more than a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Since you've seen it, it has been cooked once. Pottery, we call that firing. And it has been cooked the first time to 1,800 degrees. And we call that the bisque, or the biscuit. The French call it the biscuit. And you'll see that the clay is quite absorbent. If we watch that just for a minute, the water will just soak right in and disappear. But it is quite strong. Very strong. And the reason we do that is so that we can glaze and decorate it. I've added glaze to this one. There's a brown glaze here and a blue trim, and this is also blue, and the lid is brown and blue and blue. My painting is inspired by the Lascaux caves in France and the Altamira caves in northern Spain. So you can see that this is a stamped decoration. It's rarely exactly the same. And if you find a good art history book and open it up in the very front of the book, you'll see probably these exact caves that I'm talking about, because they're known to be the oldest man-made paintings and drawings ever found. What I find terrific is that it's proof that our species, Homo sapien, right from our core, that we want to make art. We'll put that aside for now, and we'll load that into the kiln later. And I'll be firing these overnight, and in 2 days you can see the finished pieces. Cones for pottery have been used for 1,000 years or more. The Chinese use a similar version that are little circles. And basically they go into the kiln where they can be seen in from the outside. The first one will be bent over, and the second one, which is a cone 6, will be bent nicely, and the cone 7, which is a guard cone. If that goes over too much, then I know that my pottery is overfired. When I get here in the morning, my kiln will be just warm. I'll still be able to put my hand in front of it, and from there I'll turn it up quite rapidly. This is called a preheat. My kiln is fired, and it's been cooling for a full day. And although it's a little bit warm to touch, it's plenty cool enough to open. And we've got a nice bowl here with the cave decoration. And here's our teapot. So you can see the cave decoration and the spout that you watched me put on, very similar to the one that you saw. This is my cone 5, and it's completely bent over. This is my cone 6 in the middle. And if this cone 7 was bent over more, I would say that was overfired. That's our finished piece. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I'm just over the border from Plattsburgh, New York, on the way to Montreal. I hope you'll stop into my studio and visit. I teach every Saturday, and my website is easy to find. It's www.lepotier.com. My name is Ronald Potier, and I'm fairly easy to find on Facebook. Cheers. I hope you enjoyed it.